Avatar: The Last Airbender is finally a big deal again. Everybody's talking about it. But what exactly is it that makes it so legendary? Ultimately, there's only one thing that makes or breaks a franchise, and that's the characters. Luckily, the entire cast of this series is full of iconic heroes. Aang's journey to master all 4 elements before Sozin's comet arrives makes for quite the character arc.
Appa, yip yip!
He starts off as just a silly kid who runs away from the responsibilities thrust upon him. In the end, though, he becomes the true hero we all knew he could be. That's really impressive when you realize the entire series takes place in under a year, which is why Aang had a very successful business as a personal trainer after he saved the world. The rest of Team Avatar more than pull their weight as well. Katara of the freaking Southern Water Tribe doesn't have time for anyone's BS. There's this legendary waterbending master who refuses to train her because she's a girl. So what does she do?
I'll be outside if you're man enough to fight.
She takes him on full force in front of the entire tribe. Then there's Toph, who makes every other earthbender look like they're playing with rocks. The girl figured out how to bend the earth inside metal. Haru's just not that impressive by comparison. That leaves us with Sokka. Truth be told, I found him to be quite annoying when I was a kid.
I've come to train with the master.
As an adult, though, I relate a lot more to his grumpy cynicism and brilliant tactical mind. Not only that, but the kid has mad haiku skills.
Squish squash, sling that slang!
Prince Zuko. Of all the characters in Avatar, one is definitely the standout.
Off my ship!
Prince Zuko is everything Kylo Ren ever wished he was. The disgraced son of the Fire Lord goes from being an outcast to the most metal character ever on kids' TV. That's not surprising, since he was played by Hook's Rufio, who was basically the most metal character in a kid's movie. In the 3rd episode of the series, he challenged a high-ranking Fire Nation warrior to a fire duel and won. He even refused to finish it just to prove he was the bigger man. In Season 2, Jet rolls up on Zuko in the tea shop with swords drawn. Zuko doesn't even blink as he pulls 2 swords off a customer and shows Jet how much of a punk he is without even using firebending. Iroh even refuses to shoot lightning at him, so he goes off and dares a storm to strike him down just for the practice. He's got crazy ninja skills as the Blue Spirit, was basically made into Clint Eastwood and Zuko alone, and becomes the youngest Fire Lord ever. The real heart of his story comes from his relationship with his uncle Iroh. He helps Zuko discover who he truly is and not who his father set him up to be. It doesn't hurt that Iroh was voiced by the legendary Mako. May he rest in peace. The man voiced Iroh and Aku from Samurai Jack. If that isn't enough to make you a legend, what is? Long before Thanos was teasing his face to MCU fans, the Avatar villains were hyping themselves up. We don't fully see Ozai, the main villain of the series, until Season 3. Azula appears in every opening sequence, but isn't introduced until the very end of Season 2. Say what you want to about the Ozai family, but they really know how to be dramatic. When it was finally time to see Azula and Ozai in action, they did not disappoint. They were hyping Aang versus Ozai the entire series, and it was so worth it. Even with all 4 elements mastered, he barely scraped by against the Phoenix King. Ozai's also voiced by the Joker and Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill. As if you needed another reason to love the guy. Let's face it, as cool as Ozai turned out to be, Azula is the real villain of Avatar. Has there ever been a character that you loved to hate quite as much as her? She's a lightning-throwing, fire-bending prodigy, a tactical genius, and a straight-up sociopath. In the last episode, her final duel against Zuko and Katara was more gripping than anything the Fire Lord was up to, and that's saying something. The first thing that jumps out about Avatar: The Last Airbender is how much pure freaking fun it is. In a world where so many franchises decide to go the grim and gritty route, looking at you, Game of Thrones, Avatar goes a different way. From the first episode where Aang teaches the weary Southern Water Tribe kids how to play like kids, the show charms you with its light, fun tone. No matter how dark the show gets, it never forgets to find the fun. Aang is pretty much as motivated to learn all the elements as he is to riding every fun animal in the world. See, Aang manages to create a beautiful zoo in under a minute. Let's see you do that, Tiger King. Not only does the show feature so many fun moments like this, but it serves the themes of the show. Aang has to learn from several different teachers over the series, but he possesses a wisdom of his own. The series never forces Aang to grow up like many other shows would have. Instead, it shows how much wisdom there is in keeping that childlike sense of fun and innocence. So every time you catch yourself smiling at a fun Avatar scene, don't get embarrassed. Revel in it. That's what Aang would want. People love to talk about the incredible worlds created by the Star Wars, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and Harry Potter franchises. In these conversations, somehow people completely forget to talk about how cool the world of Avatar is. Avatar has a world that's just as dense and incredible as any of its contemporaries. Each place they visit has its own history, from Kyoshi Island to the abandoned air temples. The best settings in the show are the massive bending cities, though. The Northern Water Tribe exists in this giant city made of ice. The show really drives into how every part of this city could work in a world where humans can control water and ice. Everything from the ice gates to the canal system is thought through to the point where it feels like you could step into the city from the television. The one that gets the most attention is the fascinating city of Ba Sing Se. The show spends several episodes with the city from multiple perspectives. We get to see everything from its complex inner politics to its difficult immigration system. No other Nickelodeon show does that. They never dive into the inner politics of SpongeBob's Bikini Bottom, no matter how many letters I send them. Action sequences in some cartoons can get kind of boring. Sometimes they just evolve into hard-to-follow punch-a-thons that have no real substance. The action sequences in Avatar are not like that at all. Every bending move in the series is based on real Chinese martial arts. The waterbenders use Tai Chi, the earthbenders use Hung-Gar Kung Fu, the firebenders use Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, and the airbenders use Bagua, or circle walking. All of these moves were heavily researched and assisted by real martial arts experts. Not only that, but the non-bending characters have unique skill sets of their own. Whether it's Azula's sidekicks, Ty Lee or Mei, or the Kyoshi warriors, everyone in Avatar gives 112%. These characters either have unique weapons like the Kyoshi warrior fans, or use variations on martial arts that make them formidable even to benders. Tell me you didn't freak out the first time you saw Ty Lee take out Katara's bending. More than that, though, Avatar often uses these scenes to tell a story. In The Blue Spirit, Aang and Zuko fight together and discover how formidable a team they make. Little did we know that they were just planting seeds for Zuko to train Aang in Season 3. That's some impressive foreshadowing right there. As fun as Avatar can be, it still manages to lay down some tough philosophical questions. The road to saving the world and gaining redemption is a rocky one that's filled with dubious choices and unsettling realities. In the very first season, Aang has to deal with two tribes who have been feuding for generations. The two sides are so deeply entrenched into their feud that they turn Sokka and Katara against each other. Aang manages to coax them into working together by lying to them about their own history. It's played for laughs, but that's a pretty messed up thing to do. In the end of the first season, Admiral Zhao destroys the Spirit of the Moon. Sokka's girlfriend Yue has to give up her life to save the moon. That leads to some awkwardness as Sokka tries to romance Suki while his jealous ex, the Moon, watches over him. One of the biggest surprises in the series is when the gang watches a Fire Nation play about themselves. They get to witness firsthand how the Fire Nation has bent their story into propaganda. Not many children's cartoons deal with propaganda and brainwashing, but Avatar goes there. If someone were to tell you about the complex lore of Avatar, you'd think they were talking about a 10-part book series. Frankly, it's incredible how much they managed to pack into 3 seasons of 20-minute episodes. Throughout the gang's journey, they're introduced to all sorts of crazy things. Aang frequently has to go to the spirit world where he faces off against creepy monsters that steal faces and angry pandas. They also deal with an ancient library sunken into the sand that's guarded by a giant owl. Interestingly enough, real libraries have a surprising lack of giant owl guardians. The main event, though, is the Avatar reincarnation cycle. Aang discovers that he's one in a long line of avatars who have all had their own epic journeys. The one we get to see the most of is Roku, who was close to Fire Lord Sozin before their falling out led to the Fire Nation's rampage. The most interesting of the avatars is undoubtedly Avatar Kyoshi. In one episode, Aang has to stand trial for a crime she's accused of. She appears to everyone as a ghost/surprise witness where she straight up confesses to the crime and shows absolutely no remorse for it. Netflix, you can make us all an Avatar Kyoshi show, if you want. If there's one problem with Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's that there isn't enough of it. While many shows go on for like 7 seasons, Avatar ends after 3. Luckily, Nickelodeon heard our cries of anguish and decided to have mercy upon us by delivering a sequel. Avatar: The Legend of Korra is definitely a worthy successor to The Last Airbender. It expands upon the world Aang left behind and even allows it to change. The world has advanced through industrialization into this cool steampunk world. There are bending sports, massive cities, and even scarier villains. Not only that, but Korra is another fantastic leading character. When the series starts, she's already well on her way to mastering all of the elements. Korra also had a love interest that shook the internet when its finale dropped. After years of fans shipping it, Korra ends up with Asami, making her an LGBTQ icon aside from just the savior of the world. Netflix, hurry up and get the rights to Legend of Korra already. If you're like everyone else and you binged all of Avatar, don't worry. Netflix is already working on a live-action adaptation of the original series. So far, we don't know much about it, but we do know that the creators are heavily involved this time around. Plus, they have quite the leg up. Since M. Night Shyamalan directed The Last Airbender so terribly, now they know all the things not to do.
It's time for you to stop doing this!
Not only that, but they are releasing the first Avatar novels dealing with the life and times of Avatar Kyoshi. So Netflix wouldn't have any trouble at all adapting that into another animated series if they wanted to. I mean, she created an entire island just because she couldn't deal with people's nonsense anymore. We all need to get on her level. Aside from that, there are plenty of comics out there that detail what Aang and the gang got up to since the series ended. They deal with the big mystery about Zuko's mother and fill in some of the gaps between Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Honestly though, this is probably all just the tip of the iceberg. Avatar has been a huge hit for Netflix and is finally getting the respect it deserves. The sky's the limit on what this franchise could become. I know I'll be watching.
What bending style would you want most? Between fire, earth, water, and air, you've got a lot of great choices. But out of all of them, which one is going to make you the most powerful? Avatar: The Last Airbender introduced us to a fantastical world full of amazing abilities. And thanks to Netflix, the show is back on everyone's radar. So this video is all about the awesome powers from the show and discussing which bending style is actually the most powerful. The answer may surprise you. Let's get into it. How did Katara say it? Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony, but everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. But we know now that the Fire Nation was really only able to take over thanks to a magic space rock in the sky that enhanced their abilities tenfold. Without it, the four elemental bending styles would be about even, right? Wrong! If you really examine the four bending styles, you'll see that there is a clear ranking from least powerful to most powerful. And today we're going to answer that age-old question of which bending style is the most powerful out of all of them. So, okay, to begin, let's start at the bottom of the power charts. Now, mind you, we're not calling any bending style weak, as they're all super powerful in their own ways. But this list is examining what bending style would make you the most powerful in the real world. So because of that, we'll start with firebending, which is an amazing ability, but probably won't do you a lot of favors today. Like the way we've seen it depicted, it's a very aggressive attacking style without a lot of defensive moves. A good firebender won't really think about defense, but rather just attack more. It's easy to consider firebending as a product of rage and aggression because that's how we saw the Fire Lord and the Fire Nation utilize it in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But leave it to Iroh to put things into perspective. To hear him explain it, firebenders use overpowering force tempered by an unflinching will to accomplish tasks and desires. To be a strong firebender means you have to have something in you driving you to success. And all of that is great. I mean, you got your bending style from dragons after all. How cool is that? But there are just too many downsides to being a firebender. Unless you have a strong goal or desire in life to fuel you, your flame would sputter out with a whimper. And can you imagine how hard it would be to hide firebending from the world? If you suddenly start spouting flames out of your fingers, you're gonna turn a few heads. Next up, let's talk about earthbending. As powerful and dominating as it appears, it actually comes from a place of patience. To be a powerful earthbender, it doesn't necessarily take a ripped physique like Boomy, although that certainly helps, but rather it takes the ability to listen to the world around you. A good earthbender will wait and listen for the opportune moment for their opponent to make a mistake, and then strike efficiently and effectively. Humans originally learned how to earthbend by observing and imitating the geokinetic abilities of blind badger moles who live in the mountains. Those big fellas knew how to listen to the earth around them in order to move efficiently, and it's also a huge factor why Toph is such an extraordinary earthbender. Because she's blind, she relies on her sense of hearing and her sense of touch to move and fight, and it allows for a deeper connection with the earth. And in the real world, think of all the advantages earthbending could bring you. You know that road construction that always slows down traffic around your home? Well, you could fix it easily with a few snaps of your fingers. But as the world becomes more technologically advanced, it seems that general earthbending would get left behind. Unless you manage to learn how to metal bend like Toph did. Besides, imagine all the destruction you would cause by moving large chunks of earth around. Which brings me to the second most powerful bending style, waterbending. Overall, I think there's a general stigma around waterbending because it doesn't seem as aggressive or powerful as earth or fire. But not only is water one of the most powerful forces on Earth, it also comes with some extreme benefits that make it a bending style that should not be messed with in any circumstance. A really powerful waterbender could not only bend the water in your nearest brand name water filter, but also could suck water and moisture right out of the air if necessary. We've even seen Katara bend sweat before, and that is not even getting into the scariest bending style of all, blood bending. By far, bloodbending is the most twisted form of bending around, and if a waterbender was evil enough, they could use bloodbending to even block people's bending abilities. And sure, that's the negative side of waterbending, but also don't forget how much good it can do too. Waterbending is also known for healing injuries, which is incredibly helpful in life. That makes it way more powerful than the other bending styles. So yeah, waterbending is an extremely powerful bending style that is useful both in Avatar's world and in our own. But it's not the most powerful, and since there's only one element left, I think you know where I'm going with this. That's right, the most powerful bending ability and one of the rarest abilities is the ability to click that subscribe button. Am I right, everybody? Yeah, finger guns, boom, 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 click, 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 and hit that notification bell. Woo! I think our perception of airbenders will forever be skewed because of Aang. For the entirety of the original show, Aang was this fun-loving, mostly happy kid who went with the flow and had a generally positive and peaceful attitude. And because Aang was the Avatar and we expected him to be this powerful warrior, it kind of overshadowed just how powerful airbending actually was. But I'll say this now, I think airbending is the most powerful bending style. Sure, the air nomads are peaceful monks and would never do anything to rise up against the world, but if they all suddenly drank evil juice and turned against humanity, well, let's just say that war wouldn't have lasted 100 years. And all of this is because of an airbender's versatility and lack of major weaknesses. Airbending takes the potential destructive force of fire and earth, but it makes it into something precise and even more dangerous. You might find yourself in a situation where there's no earth to bend, or creating a fire would result in a catastrophe. But there will always be air around you to draw from. It's more elegant and graceful than waterbending and can be used as both a forceful attack or an unbreakable defense. It's the most well-rounded bending technique in the way that it could overwhelm your opponents but also provide an incredible defense. Just imagine if you had airbending in the real world. You would have no limitations to what you could accomplish. You'll move faster, live better, and most importantly, not draw a lot of attention to yourself, assuming you don't have any, like blue arrow tattoos on your forehead or something. And don't even get me started on what would happen if you wanted to become evil. Zahir from Season 3 of Legend of Korra was the season's big bad, and he showed just how deadly airbending could be when done right. I mean, just ask the Earth Queen. If you don't remember, Zahir literally sucked the air out of her lungs until she suffocated, which is easily one of the worst things we've ever seen on the show. And sure, airbending may not have that next generation upgrade that the other bending styles do, but Zahir did learn to fly on his own, which was just an incredible moment. Seriously, do not mess with airbending. So, as of right now, airbending is the most powerful bending technique, but I'm not saying it will stay that way. Things could change over time. Because if there is one thing that the Avatar universe has taught us, it's that things don't stay the same. They evolve and adapt to bring a better balance to the world. The air nomads were wiped out by the Fire Nation, but the universe wouldn't keep it that way forever. The Legend of Korra saw everyday people suddenly start developing airbending abilities to correct the damage done by Fire Lord Ozai's crazy war, and balance was finally restored. This implies that the universe will never let one bending technique become more powerful than another. If one bending style suddenly gets a fantastic new ability, it's a safe bet that the other bending techniques will evolve too. And we've seen that concept represented in the show show with benders learning how to use their abilities in different ways. At first, we just saw firebenders being able to lightning bend, which soon became more common in the world of Legend of Korra. Toph evolved earthbending all on her own when she figured out how to metal bend, which would change earthbending forever. Fast forward to Korra's time and all the police use metal bending. If that wasn't enough, earthbending evolved once again in Legend of Korra as lava bending became more of a commonplace thing. This is how those bending styles grew. It starts with just one person mastering an ability, and then more and more people learn how to do it. Talk about progress! And if you think about it, waterbending evolved with the concept of bloodbending and chi blocking, so it's scary to think what will come next in that evolution. But that brings me to airbending. Since airbending was wiped out for so long, it hasn't had the time to evolve to its next state. If I had to speculate, I would imagine airbending will evolve to the point where it could control other elements. Well, now hold on a second, I'm not crazy, just think about it, okay? Oxygen is such an important part of both fire and water that why couldn't a really strong airbender learn to harness those elements too? It's a natural next step. If that were the case, then surely it would be no question. Airbending would be the most powerful technique.
The new love for Avatar: The Last Airbender has reignited one of the greatest debates in fandom history. Who's the best Avatar?
I'm very confused right now.
While everybody both loves Aang and Korra, there can be only one. If we're going to answer the most important Avatar-related question of all time, we need to start by analyzing both heroes. It only seems right that Aang gets first dibs.
I'm the Avatar.
By Aang, I have to clarify that I mean the Aang we see during the television series, not the old man he eventually becomes. We don't really get to see adult Aang in action, so we can't really judge what he was like. When we meet Aang, he's a master airbender. We don't see much of the other airbenders in the series, but we can assume that he's on the upper tier skill level. He's able to go up against master benders who have had decades more experience than him without missing a beat. His duel against King Bumi occurred before Aang had even started learning waterbending, and he was still able to go toe-to-toe with one of the greatest earthbenders alive. Sure, Bumi wasn't giving it 100%, but that 11-year-old definitely made him sweat. This is important to single out because this shows just how brilliant of a warrior Aang was before he even approached his true power. Despite the fact that he was an immature child, he possessed battle awareness and creative bending skills that rivaled the best warriors of his age. Then he started learning to bend the other elements. While most avatars have years to master these skills, Aang had months. Sozin's comet was on its way, and Aang had to cram in as much bending training he could before his final exam against the Fire Lord. There was definitely a lot of procrastination on his part, but that didn't matter, because he put a serious hurt on Ozai. You know that's gotta be just so embarrassing, right? Imagine going from about to conquer the world to defeated by a child in one afternoon. He'd been hyped for his comet's superpowers his entire life, only to mess it up right at the end. The kid even took his bending away as if he needed more shame. If you ever think you've had a bad day, trust me, it's nothing compared to what Ozai went through. Toph, Katara, Master Pakku, Zuko, and a few random tutors all had quite a time teaching Aang the other bending styles. His immaturity and short attention span proved to be quite the roadblock for each new element he tried to master. Most of his problems came from the different philosophies the other nations possessed. The air nomads seemed to live a pretty carefree life of fun and peace. This made it hard for him to study under a sexist, no-nonsense instructor like Pakku. Luckily, Katara water-slapped some sense into the old guy, so things got a bit easier for Aang. He didn't get so lucky when it came to training with Toph.
Keep your knees high, Twinkle Toes!
She showed him that an earthbender needs to be strong and tough. These are words that were never used to describe Aang. Still, he managed to persevere, and he found his inner strength. Though, to be fair, Katara helped out with Toph as well. She was really his MVP teacher. Firebending was actually his greatest challenge. He tried to skip ahead in the cycle to learn it before water or earth and ended up burning Katara. The only way he was able to make peace with fire was to come to terms with the danger that came with it. Why all of that makes Aang more impressive is that he went from struggling with each form to him gaining relative mastery over them all in only a few weeks. We can assume that a lot of his training happened off-screen, but most of it seems to be on-the-job training. There's no better teacher than Azula throwing blue fireballs and lightning at you. I would probably learn how to earthbend just to get away from that terrifying little teenage sociopath. Despite everything impressive about Aang, he never really becomes a well-balanced bender. Even after he gains mastery over all the elements, he still favors air much more than the others. He's like 90% an airbender and like 10% everything else. You really can't say the same for Avatar Korra. If you haven't watched The Legend of Korra, go watch it because it's awesome.
I'm locking you away for another 10,000 years.
Pretty much from the get-go, Korra shows that she's not Aang at all.
Feels good to be back.
While Aang initially ran away from his Avatar duties, Korra jumped into hers with both feet. No one in the series has quite the attitude Korra has about bending. Some see it as a way of life. Some see it as a connection to nature. Then there are those that see it as nothing but a weapon. For Korra, it's a true passion. Like Ash Ketchum before her, she wants to be the very best, like no one ever was. If that passion wasn't obvious from the opening moments of the series, it becomes obvious when she literally joins a pro bending team. That's right, she's not just a warrior or a hero, but a professional athlete.
Woohoo! Man overboard!
Pro bending might just be the coolest thing in the Avatar universe. It's like Quidditch, but better. We all love Magic Broom Soccer, but pro bending doesn't have a golden snitch that just ruins the game. Unfortunately, Korra has to cut her career short. You see, Ozai and Azula may have been terrifying villains, but they have nothing on Korra's bad guys. The socio-political conflicts that Korra had to contend with are also much more complicated than what Aang had to deal with. Aang mostly just had to stop the Fire Nation from trying to take over the world. You don't really have to ponder over whether or not you're doing the right thing when your enemy wants to attack the frickin' spirit of the moon. Things may have gotten trippy in Ba Sing Se, but the rest of it was mostly straightforward, good versus evil stuff. Korra never really had that experience. She spent her Avatar tenure trying to keep the peaceful world Aang created together. Amon and the Equalists weren't looking to take over the world so much as they were trying to fix inequality. A world where some people can bend elements and some can't could easily be argued to be fundamentally wrong. It's so much harder to be an Avatar when your villains make sense. Not only that, but Amon was also a psycho bloodbender who took people's bending away. And that guy was only the first season's villain. From there, she had to contend with the opening of the spirit world, civil wars, and a giant robot carrying a weapon of spiritual destruction. That really makes Azula's drill seem pretty unimpressive in comparison. The Red Lotus very nearly destroys the Avatar cycle altogether. Somehow, even that isn't as scary as Kuvira, who might be the best bender in the series. Well, maybe second best. Toph is probably number one. No villain in this series is as terrifying as Vaatu, the literal embodiment of chaos. Aang might have defeated the Emperor Palpatine of his show, but Korra had to face down the Sauron of hers. If Iroh is the Avatar world's greatest uncle, Unalaq is the world's worst for letting Vaatu out. Seriously, Korra's post-series life should have been just an infinite vacation with Asami. She had to deal with all of this before most of us are even in college. And you thought your high school days were rough. Not only that, but she had to learn techniques that Aang never had to contend with in the series. Sure, we see her having already mastered most of the elements, but in Korra's timeline, that isn't as formidable. In an industrialized bending era, it's not enough to just be Avatar. While Aang struggled with many elements, Korra seemed to struggle the most with airbending. It was kind of the same problem in that the philosophy of airbending didn't mesh with her worldview. Korra's a fiercely competitive person, so a carefree, peaceful mindset is just not her thing. In fact, it wasn't until she had most of her powers taken away that she began to get the hang of air. It's kind of funny that she used airbending to throw punches at Amon. The air nomads would never have done that. From there, her job only got harder though. In the second season, the world is beset upon by dark spirits that Korra has to contend with. This is only the start of the constant threats that continue to plague the world in her time. The show really puts her through the ringer as she gets cut off from bending, cut off from her past lives, and even gets briefly wheelchair-bound. None of that matters though, as she always pulls through. Korra masters techniques like metal bending, energy bending, and even becomes a giant titan in her fight against Vaatu. That alone might be enough to win this. So, which one of these two Avatar forces of nature are the best? Well, let's go over our facts and calculate the results.
You guys go ahead.
Aang managed to master 3 elements in under a year at the age of 11. He defeated Ozai by taking his powers away, mastered the Avatar state, and brought balance and peace to a fractured world. Korra showed true promise with 3 of the 4 elements during childhood.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
By her teenage years, she had already mastered those 3 before finally conquering air. She then mastered spirit bending, defeated powerful enemies like the Red Lotus and Vaatu, and kept a splintering world intact. Ultimately, while both avatars rank among the greatest in history, Korra is the one who is more powerful. The real question is, how was she able to do all these things though? Well, that's simple. It's because of Aang that she was able to become arguably the most powerful avatar of all time. During the Avatar: The Last Airbender timeline, there were perhaps more innovations in the bending world than any other in history. We saw things like plant bending, blood bending, metal bending, and more. Aang learned techniques like lightning redirection and energy bending that weren't exactly taught by the Master Pakus of the world. All of these advancements led to the highly industrialized and spiritually challenging world that Korra lived in. They managed to go from basically medieval China on the verge of industrialization to 1920s New York in a generation. Aang, Toph, and the gang started quite the renaissance. These skills that Aang acquired and perfected led to both the challenges and victories that Korra lived through.
Did you see that?
Aang taking away Ozai's powers led to others like Amon and the Equalists doing the same. Korra then was able to learn how to restore not only her bending, but the bending abilities of everyone attacked by the group. This in no way is a slight against Aang or takes away from all the amazing things Korra was able to do. If anything, it's the entire point of the Avatar cycle. Avatars reincarnate so that they can learn and grow along with the world. Aang spends his entire series making up for the mistakes Avatar Roku made with Fire Lord Sozin. In a similar way, Avatar Kyoshi had to be the toughest avatar of all time, just to make up for how lame Kuruk was. Seriously, the guy only made it to 33 and lost his fiancée to the frickin' face stealer. No wonder Kyoshi had no chill whatsoever.
Hey everybody, Avatar Kyoshi here.
Ultimately, Avatar Aang and Avatar Korra don't live on in a state of competition, but a state of harmony that other avatars didn't with their previous lives. Their failures and successes aren't proof that either is truly better, but that the two are the ultimate avatar pair. The better world that Aang strived to create mixed with Korra's raw passion and determination made her grow beyond what any other avatar was able to achieve. I don't know about you, but I don't think that Aang would want it any other way. In the same way, all Avatar fans should live in harmony as well. Whether or not you think Aang or Korra is better, we can all come together and agree that both series are true works of art, and that the movie is really bad. It's just so bad.
No kidding.
Horrible. You said it.
With Avatar on Netflix and back in the mainstream, the debate rages on. Is Avatar an anime? Some like to think so, others not so much. Most kind of see it as a gray area. Yes, Avatar wasn't made in Japan, so many might not consider it an anime. But there are other factors that have many on the fence. Well, today, let's discuss some reasons why I think Avatar is really an anime. We've seen this play out in many stories before. Myths and legends follow the story pattern of the Chosen One, the destined hero meant to vanquish the big bad at the end. It's called the monomyth, or the hero's journey, to borrow a few literary terms. Avatar is no different in this regard, but there is something about Aang's destiny that is very anime-like. You see, the Avatar is not merely just a powerful warrior or bender. The Avatar is the sole person to bring balance to all four nations. There's only ever one Avatar at any given time, and Aang is it during the show's run.
Allow me.
In anime, the Chosen One is usually given a power only they possess and nobody else. Similar to how Naruto was the only one to hold the nine-tailed fox, or Ichigo was this weird soul reaper, Quincy, Hollow Thing, and so on. Most shonen protagonists have a unique special power that signifies them as the hero of their story. In anime, generally, it's not enough that the hero be the most pivotal character in their story, but they also have to do in such a unique way that only they have the power to take out the big bad. No anime character would be complete without a tragic backstory or two. In Avatar, nearly everyone has some kind of tragic backstory. In the episode titled The Storm, we get to see the events that lead to both Aang being frozen in the iceberg and Zuko banished and on his journey to capture the Avatar. Not only is it a powerful episode with a top-notch character development, but it's a kind of backstory that is all too common in a lot of action anime. In Fullmetal Alchemist, the key motivation for the Elric brothers is to get their bodies back after they tragically lost their mother. Their trauma helped shape them, and that is true for a lot of anime protagonists. Most of the time, a dead relative is involved to not only give a tragic backstory to the main character, but to also make it easier for the writers so they don't have to write compelling parent characters. It's really hard to write good parents, you know? The path of a chosen one in anime is not often an easy one, no matter how bright and cheery those openings might sound. If you've seen more than a few anime, you've probably heard this phrase uttered. I fight for my friends, or some variation of it.
There is nothing wrong with letting people who love you help you.
This sentiment-based superpower comes in many forms. The power of love, the power of friendship, and much, much more.
We're gonna be best friends forever.
Basically, the big bad villain and all their power can't stand up to the sheer might of a well-maintained social network of like-minded individuals. While the power of friendship is prevalent in many stories, anime is rife with friendship-powered protagonists. You don't have to look far to see this, from Yu-Gi-Oh! To Dragon Ball and beyond. In Avatar, Aang had to face the Fire Lord alone in the end, but the threat from the Fire Nation was a multi-fronted enemy. Azula needed to be stopped. Katara and Zuko went to deal with her. Ba Sing Se needed to be liberated. The White Lotus took care of that. The Fire Lord's fleet needed to be dealt with, and Sokka, Suki, and Toph took that on. Aang needed to rely on the friends he made along the way in order to take on the massive threat of the Fire Nation. Like I said before, it's really hard to write parent characters. From the Avatar cast, we're led to assume Aang's parents are dead. He was raised by monks, so even his father figure died. Katara and Sokka's mother died during a Fire Nation raid. Zuko's mom was assumed to be dead during the show, but in the comics afterwards, she lived on. But then eventually died. Jeez, is this a Nickelodeon cartoon or a Disney movie? Because there are a lot of dead or absent parents here. While often tied to the tragic backstory, an anime protagonist's parents are either dead or never mentioned. I mean, just think of all the greatest anime protagonists. Naruto's parents? Dead. Ichigo? Mom's dead. Goku? Dead parents. Luffy? Well, actually, we've never seen his mom, so she's MIA for now. If we're looking strictly at the biggest shonen anime protagonists, Aang kind of has a leg up on all of them, since during the entire running of Avatar, Aang's parents were never mentioned or shown. He was raised in a monastery by the air nomads. They may have a different way of life and might not believe necessarily in the family unity like we do, but still, Aang did have parents that we never saw. Not even once. In animation, there is a suspension of disbelief we as viewers agree to take on.
What?
We understand that while Wile E. Coyote blew himself up with dynamite in one scene and then appeared in the next scene completely unharmed because it was a cartoon, anime similarly has characters firing giant beams of pure energy at one another and punching people clear into the sky and crashing down with great force. Because it's animation, it isn't real. Character invincibility as a concept has been greatly explored in anime for both action and comedic effect. Characters can endure a lot of pain and walk away from the situation relatively unscathed. Avatar follows in these footsteps and also adds in a few instances unique to them. For example, earthbending is a great example of character invincibility. To bend earth, one has to often dig into the earth with their bare hands to summon pillars of rock. Earthbenders also take hits like champions. Boulders crumble around them and they shake it off like nothing happened. Just as Goku can take a direct ki blast, the Avatar gang can be pelted with fire, rocks, large shards of ice, and be more or less fine. If you want to get better, you gotta train. And training takes time. And time is something that you can't really manage in a 22-minute episode. You know what that means? Training montage. The daily repetition of training and discovering who you are through training can be a rewarding and insightful step towards self-actualization. But for the people watching, you gotta speed things up a bit. Jump into a hyperbolic time chamber, do a time skip, and train for 2 solid years before meeting with your crew. You gotta put in the time to see those results. Seen in movies and anime alike, the training montage has been the best way to convey the passage of time with progress. At several points, Avatar Aang trains with his various masters. We don't see every single training session. That would be boring. So the process is sped up a bit. The results are still the same, however, as after 3 months of training, Aang had all he needed to defeat the Fire Lord. Well, actually, what he really needed was a long-forgotten art to take away someone's bending that was given to him by an ancient lion turtle, but hey, there was no montage of that now. There are a few colloquial terms for this. Shonen Rage, God Mode, whatever you call it, there's a point in action anime where the main character surges with awesome power that just can't be topped. There are a lot of states for many anime. We know more than a few. Super Saiyan, Gear Second, Full Cowling 100%, Killer Move, Serious Punch, the list goes on. Avatar, of course, has its own heightened main character state, the Avatar state. While in the Avatar state, Aang had the collective knowledge and power of all his previous incarnations. While in this state, Aang unlocked a level of control over the elements he could never have on his own. Much like using One for All, Aang is at his strongest, but also at his most vulnerable. While he kicks serious butt, if he dies while in the Avatar state, the chain will be broken, and the Avatar will not reincarnate. The Avatar state is also closely related with going Super Saiyan because it was often used when Aang was angry, and it was often fueled by raw emotion. While in later seasons he was able to control the Avatar state a little bit, for a good chunk of the series it was Aang's version of the Shonen Rage. Perhaps one of the first things that people bring up when they want to say that Avatar is an anime is the aesthetic. The music, the land, the character designs, the philosophy, all of it is very Eastern. Avatar stands out as a Western cartoon that takes heavy influences from Eastern aesthetics, and more than just a surface level too. The four nations are clearly inspired by Tibet, Japan, Chinese, and Inuit cultures. The characters all look like they come from those lands. Characters are not Americanized, more or less. The original soundtrack of the show takes a lot of instruments and styles from these different lands. While I may not be a music theory major, the music of Avatar is a rich tapestry of culture. Now, I'm not saying Avatar is an anime solely because it borrows Asian and Eastern aesthetics. Characters' motivations like Aang and Iroh come from Eastern philosophies like Zen Buddhism. To say Avatar merely adopts these aesthetics to give the world its unique look is a disservice to the hard work and study that went into making this world feel not only real to the viewer, but also human. Its closeness to the source material gives it an extra layer of authenticity that I think deserves an honorary anime title. Now, watch closely as we basically walk back on our previous entry. I'm kidding, of course, but only slightly. You see, while it is true that the creators of Avatar worked really hard to make the culture and aesthetic, there was something else happening in America around the time Avatar was being produced. Anime was going mainstream. In the late 90s and early 2000s, anime was beginning to make its way across the pond and onto American televisions. Now, anime had been in America far before the 90s, but it was during this time the medium really started to take off. This was mostly due to shows aimed at young kids like Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Cardcaptor Sakura, and many more. It was such a driving force that Western cartoons began to incorporate some of the common anime aesthetics into their shows. Big eyes, exaggerated expressions, and so on. Some shows did this more than others, but Avatar was not spared from this Japanimation phase from that era. Now, this trend was mostly prevalent in Season 1 and quickly died down in Seasons 2 and 3, but even a great show like Avatar was not immune to the influences of anime. Perhaps the most compelling and concrete reason Avatar is considered an anime is for one simple reason. It's got a beach episode, baby! That's it, everybody. The final nail in the coffin for this case. And that nail is in the shape of a bikini. On a more serious note, the beach episode is one of those cliches people have accepted and cherished. Much like a comfy pair of slippers or a great pillow, the beach episode is a welcome trope that, while it may not offer any narrative depth or character development, does give the viewer a nice low-stakes episode of wholesomeness and low-level fan service. Avatar's beach episode revolves around the Fire Nation girls and Zuko as they take a trip to Ember Island for a weekend of rest and relaxation. During this time, we see a new side to their character dynamics and how they play off of one another. We also learn that while Azula is crazy beyond all reason, she's also extremely awkward when it comes to any social interactions. The Fire Nation crew are a bunch of dysfunctional teenagers, as evidenced by the ending where they completely trash a pompous kid's house. There was no war to win, no nations to free, just sun, sand, and surf. Oh, yeah, and property damage. Avatar: The Last Airbender may be a really fun show, but it has some truly terrifying villains. Watch as we count down the top 10, and be sure to watch to the end to find out what happened to number 1 after the series ended. The very first villain of the series is also the show's most memorable character. Prince Zuko immediately showed himself to be a fierce adversary who would literally pursue Aang to the end of the earth. I mean, the guy swam through the waters of the North Pole into enemy territory and braved a blizzard to capture Aang. All of that was shortly after an admiral in his own army blew him up. Zuko probably had his own line of motivational posters in the Fire Nation. Zuko's real talents were with swords and stealth. Nothing he has done in the series quite compares to his time as the Blue Spirit. He managed to break into a heavily guarded Fire Nation prison and rescue the Avatar all without using his bending. If he'd taught Aang how to be a sneaky ninja instead of a firebender, he would have defeated Ozai a whole lot faster. The only problem with Zuko as a villain is that his heart was never really in it. Don't let that scary scar fool ya. Zuzu is a puppy deep down. It may have taken a successful tea shop and a few betrayals to get him there, but he showed his true heroic colors in the end. You don't have to be evil to be a good villain. Sometimes we need our villains to be evil teenage lightning-bending psychopaths, and sometimes we need a villain who is just a jerk that needs to be slapped around a little bit. As far as jerks go, Master Paku is among the worst in the series. Despite the fact that the literal world was at stake, he refused to teach Katara how to waterbend just because she was a girl. Katara was the Avatar's best friend and waterbending tutor. It's only logical to teach her offensive waterbending to both protect and train Aang. Not to Paku, though. Eventually, Katara of the Southern Water Tribe had enough of that old man's nonsense and challenged him to a duel. This was basically like a white belt kid challenging a black belt master. What should have been a quick defeat for Katara ended up being a show of what a prodigy she was in front of everyone. Sure, Paku lost in the end, but he realized that she was both a worthy pupil and the granddaughter of his long-lost love. So Paku went from Katara's greatest adversary to her water-bending master. In the end, she was no doubt the best pupil he ever trained. In a world where some people can lift giant boulders into the air and shoot them without much effort, it's hard to be a regular person. Sokka spends most of his time in the series trying to figure out how to deal with this exact problem. Such a problem doesn't exist for Ty Lee, who is one of the greatest threats in the series, despite the fact that she has no fireballs or jagged rocks to chuck. Instead, she's an incredibly talented acrobat and martial artist. She uses precise moves to shut down people's bending and their bodies. Her skills are so great that she once took down both Sokka and Toph in 3 moves. Ultimately, she's less evil than she is a poor judge of who her friend should be. If Ty Lee were a girl today, you'd just know she'd be more excited about hula hooping and music festivals than she would be about world domination. Most of the time, Avatar is a show about cool elemental fights and a little kid hero who likes to ride on the backs of penguins for fun. And then there are the times when it's straight up nightmare fuel. Yeah, we're talking about Ko, the Face Stealer, aka a recurring guest star in all of our childhood nightmares. Ko has a very simple but effective shtick. He's an evil spirit that'll steal and use your face if you show even the slightest emotion. This may have been a greater challenge than facing the Fire Lord for the notoriously emotional Aang. One of his predecessors, Karuk, the Avatar of Eternal Disappointment, lost the love of his life to Ko's face-stealing antics. He went to finish Ko, but ultimately couldn't bring himself to go through with it. We all love villains who have big, complicated backstories and long arcs filled with redemption and betrayal. Of course, we also love that Darth Maul from Episode 1 kinda was a bad guy that just showed up and said very little and was just freaking lethal still. The assassin who Sokka so beautifully dubbed as Combustion Man is definitely that kind of guy. Though Sparky Boom Man is my personal favorite. See, Combustion Man, like his namesake suggests, is a master of the rare art of combustion bending. Through concentration alone, he can cause massive explosions. This makes him incredibly formidable, despite the fact that mastering it cost him several limbs and eventually his life. He came way too close to defeating the gang multiple times until he met the wrath of Sokka and his trusty boomerang. Unlike the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom dwellers, the folks of the Water Tribes are pretty chill. They mostly just heal people, build giant ice cities, and occasionally become the living embodiment of the Moon Spirit. You know, normal Water Tribe stuff. And then there's also Hama, who is creepy enough for both tribes on her own. See, Hama is a bit of an innovator in the waterbending arts. She's credited with inventing the unholy art of bloodbending. I don't really think she was the inventor of bloodbending, strictly because she was the first person who thought of it. Humans are mostly made of water, and water healers are intimately aware of how the human body works. Nope, she's the inventor of bloodbending because nobody else was quite sick enough to actually make it work. Hama absurdly was, though. Bloodbending made her an incredible, terrifying threat to Team Avatar and the world as a whole. Some fans even theorize that the Fire Nation started hunting waterbenders so ferociously after discovering that Hama could bend their internal fluids. They even think this may have led to the Fire Nation attacking Katara's mother, who posed as a bender to protect her daughter. If this were true, Hama would indirectly be one of the biggest villains of the series, who was sort of responsible for the decimation of the Southern Water Tribe by being creepy, even by Fire Nation standards. And you know that's saying something, because Azula is practically their Captain America. Admit it, during Season 1 of Avatar, there was nobody that you love to hate more than Commander-turned-Admiral Zhao. His ignorance, lack of empathy, and destructive nature make him the epitome of all that was wrong about the Ozai era of the Fire Nation. While his firebending was far too wild and imprecise for him to match the likes of Zuko and Azula, he was a master strategist. He managed to use the Yuyan archers to capture Aang and very nearly conquer the Northern Water Tribe. After searching through the Wan Shi Tong library, he discovered the embodiment of the moon spirit was a simple fish. He attacked it and very nearly made waterbenders extinct. This crime led him to being forced to wander the fog of lost souls for all eternity. If that wasn't enough to give him bad guy cred, he was voiced by Jason Isaacs. That dude was Lucius Malfoy in Harry Potter.
You lost me, my servant!
He was the Inquisitor in Star Wars Rebels and Captain Lorca in Star Trek Discovery. Zhao would have been a legendary bad guy from just that voice alone. Book 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender took a long detour from its world-hopping antics to stop at the mysterious city of Ba Sing Se. That was okay though, because the evil leader of the Dai Li, Long Feng, was more than enough villain for half a season. He had Ba Sing Se wrapped around his finger so much that none of them knew about the Fire Nation invasion. His machinations included creepy hypnosis rooms, spies with cool rock gloves, and an army of brainwashed Judees. Ultimately, the gang was able to show the Earth King what was up, but they didn't dismantle the Dai Li for some reason. Ultimately, the deceitful Earthbender was undone by someone who made his brand of evil look pretty watered down. Azula took the Dai Li from him and Ba Sing Se right after. Maybe that whole ignoring the Fire Nation plan wasn't all that smart in retrospect. Oh, hold on. It sounds like someone's knocking at my door. My apologies, loyal YouTube patrons. I was mistaken. Long Feng is the greatest Avatar character of all time. The series ends with Book 2, Episode 17. Long Feng wins and the world lives happily ever after. There is no Book 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender in Ba Sing Se. Before we jump into all the reasons why Princess Azula is awesome, there's one thing that needs to be said. Azula is 14 years old. While most people are starting high school, Azula was busy hunting avatars and conquering cities. She's also one of the greatest benders and strategists in the series. Ba Sing Se is literally described as an impenetrable city, and she took it over with some Kyoshi makeup and her best friends. Not only that, but she's actually managed to mortally wound Aang. If Katara didn't have magic moon water on her, the show would have ended right then and there. What really makes Azula a fantastic villain is that the show doesn't forget that she's a teenage girl. While she is certainly shown drinking all of her father's crazy conqueror Kool-Aid, she's still a fragile kid. This starts to show in the beach episode where Azula struggles to interact with her peers. Azula's flirting makes Sokka look like James Bond. This really hits its peak in the finale when Azula collapses in on herself as she loses everything to Zuko and Katara. In the end, she's revealed to truly be just a broken child who was forced to grow up way too fast. Few shows have ever hyped up a bad guy quite like Avatar hyped up the Fire Lord. It's dropped on Aang in Book 1 that his destiny is to face him during Sozin's Comet. From there, we get a few glimpses of him with his face obscured by shadow and flame. We hear Mark Hamill's wonderfully villainous voice, but we don't truly meet him until Book 3. There, we get to see firsthand what a monster he truly is. We knew he had plans to use Sozin's Comet, but we didn't know how twisted that plan really was. He was gonna wipe the entire Earth Kingdom off the face of the planet. Have you seen a map of the world from Avatar? The Earth Kingdom is most of it. Luckily, Aang swooped in and fulfilled his destiny by putting the hurt on the self-proclaimed Phoenix King. He even permanently took away Ozai's bending, which had to be the worst punishment for such a prideful firebender. And what happened to Ozai after the show? Well, as promised, we'll give you a little bit of what his life was like. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he basically became Hannibal Lecter. He would give Zuko creepy advice now and then, while also manipulating things from the shadows. While Zuko and Aang were trying to repair the world, Fire Nation rebels founded the new Ozai Society to reinstate the former Fire Lord. Unfortunately for Ozai, that failed, and he likely spent the rest of his days in solitary confinement. Now that Avatar is popular again, there's a good chance that more of Aang's journey might be told. Knowing Ozai, there was probably at least one more evil plan up his sleeve. Hopefully, we'll get to see it.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. That's the mantra we all grew up with thanks to Avatar: The Last Airbender. But have you ever wondered how the Fire Nation grew to be such a powerful nation in the first place? Was it all thanks to the Fire Lords, or was it something more? Let's discuss. Today's video is all about the history of the Fire Lords. I'll be diving into just how exactly these fiery leaders seized their power and how it has affected the entire Avatar world. Prepare yourself for an in-depth look at one of the most fascinating elements of Avatar political lore. And I know political lore sounds about as exciting as Zuko and Toph's big adventure together, but I promise this will be worth it. Leave it to Iroh to sum up the Fire Nation perfectly. He once told Zuko that the people of the Fire Nation have desire and will and the energy and drive to achieve what they want. And looking over their complex history, that's definitely true. Sure, a lot of their past is marred by that little thing we call the 100-Year War, but there's more to them than just that. When we think of Fire Lords in general, we think of brutal dictators thanks to people like Fire Lord Ozai, who for the longest time was our only frame of reference for what a Fire Lord could be. But did you know that the original Fire Lord actually was a role that brought peace to a war-torn land? Oh, how the tables have turned. After the very first Avatar, Avatar 1, closed the spirit portals, humans began to spread out across the globe. The group that would be known as the Fire Nation set up shop on a series of different islands that would eventually be called, you guessed it, Fire Islands, which, come on, lacks any sort of originality. I wish someone like Sokka was there when the whole naming thing went down. That would have made things so much better. Anyways, these groups of people who inhabited the Fire Islands lacked a central leader. You had different tribes and villages all working on their own expansion. Want an example? How about the Sun Warriors? You know them. They're the ones that Aang and Zuko went to see to learn about the origins of firebending and ended up doing that awesome dragon dance. Ah, that was a fun episode. But this was not a peaceful time. All these different tribes and villages were run by warlords who constantly butted heads over territory and control. Just to give you an example of the type of warlords that ran these islands, the most famous one is probably Taz, who pulled a Hunger Games style move and demanded annual tributes from all of the villages under his control. Yeah, this wasn't a good system, and it drove tribes like the Sun Warriors into hiding because the heat was just too much. Yep, that's right, I used a fire pun. You better get used to them. But overall, something had to be done to stop the madness. Well, where there's war, there's always some type of rebellion. With the future Fire Islands in disarray, a group of Bonte tribe sages escaped the area and became known as the Fire Sages. They were a religious authority who wanted to bring peace to the area, so the head sage assembled an army that defeated all the warlords in the area. Under that Fire Sage's rule, this group unified all these tribes into one nation. And since this head Fire Sage had a high level of firebending and a seemingly deep spiritual connection with fire, he was appointed as the very first Fire Lord. Talk about a promotion. Now here's something that might surprise you. Did you know that Fire Nation and the Air Nomads actually had a lot in common when it came to leadership in the early days? The Fire Sages, along with the Fire Lord, who was considered to be a first among equals, formed a council to make decisions. They were guided by a strong sense of spirituality, which makes them similar to the spiritual air monks. But of course, things didn't stay that way for long. Because of the nation's political and governmental structure, the Fire Lord eventually outgrew the rest of the Fire Sages, severing ties with them and changing the Fire Nation's religious rule into an autocratic empire that would be ruled by the Fire Lord's family. So basically he looked at everything and it's like, nah, my family can do this better. The most important thing to know about this era of time is that it was filled with war. Although the Fire Lord had a lot of power, a lot of the different clans and islands still had trouble conforming under one leader. Dynasties continued to take over only to fail, and civil war was happening everywhere you looked. Although you would think all the infighting wouldn't be great for a developing nation, it actually helped them increase their military strength, building up large armies and weapon supplies, all as the Fire Lord worked to get the Fire Nation under his fiery thumb. It would be one of the reasons why the Fire Nation could take over so easily in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Speaking of Avatar, it's interesting to look at the relationship between the Avatar and the Fire Lord over the years. Way back in Avatar Kyoshi's time, the Fire Lord was named Zoryu, and in 295 BG, which in the Avatar timeline is before Genocide, Zoryu invited Avatar Kyoshi to the Fire Nation to celebrate the Festival of Sazido. But due to a lot of complications, this visit led to Zoryu wanting to break the strength of the Fire Nation's noble clans and have all citizens only loyal to the Fire Lord. Over time, his goal worked, and the Fire Lords over the years started amassing more and more power. See, you think it's easy for one man to take over with a quick attack, but by examining the history, you'll see the Fire Lord's rise to power was a series of small moves over a long period of time. Kinda scary. But this leads us to the Avatar The Last Airbender timeline, when we can start recognizing some of those Fire Lords. Let's start with Fire Lord Sozin, who would end up starting the 100 Years' War and left Roku to die on that volcano. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Thinking about Sozin just makes my blood boil hotter than the waters at the Boiling Rock prison. But let's backtrack to his beginnings. Avatar Roku and Crown Prince Sozin were born on the same day, which again ties into how intertwined the history of the Avatar and the Fire Lord really is. And what a great time to be born into the Fire Nation. This time period was known as an era of great prosperity and modernization, and while the Earth Kingdom was entering a bit of a recession, the Fire Nation was booming. Trade, commerce, and a powerful military helped usher in an industrial revolution the likes of which the nation had never seen before. After 16 years of being best friends and living the good life, Roku was told he was the next incarnation of the Avatar and had to leave Sozin and everything else to go train. The two parted on very good terms. It stinks things couldn't stay that way. You see, at his core, Sozin always wanted more power, and that completely corrupted him at the end. A lot of that probably started when Roku was told he was going to be the Avatar. Since both of them were born on the same day around the same time, it could have easily been Sozin who was the next Avatar instead of Roku. Can you imagine knowing you were so close to being the most powerful person in the entire world? I think this notion stayed with Sozin throughout his life, but in the beginning, he was just a young man who wanted to share the prosperity of the Fire Nation with the rest of the world. In his eyes, his nation was prospering, so why shouldn't their ways of life and social reforms be shared with everyone? But this sent Sozin spiraling down a dark path that put him at odds with his old friend Avatar Roku. As things got worse, Sozin militarized the entire country by expanding the army and the navy while pushing aside things like spirituality. Sozin took advantage of the weakened Earth Kingdom and expanded the Fire Nation into their territories. Roku tried to stop all this, but he was a little blinded by his former friend, and it eventually led to his death. R.I.P. Roku. You have an awesome voice, but maybe you weren't the best judge of character? The rest is stuff we all know. Sozin's comet came, which allowed the Fire Nation to launch their attack and completely wipe out the peaceful air nomads. Sozin removed and eliminated all outside threats and solidified the true power of the Fire Lord. After Sozin passed away, his son Azulon took over, and he shared in his father's belief that the world would look a lot better if everyone dressed in stylish Fire Nation clothing, if you know what I mean. Fire Lord Azulon was just as brutal as Sozin, but he was also extremely efficient and a great tactical leader. But Fire Lord Azulon should have been more worried about his own family, because his demise didn't come from some outside threat, but from his own flesh and blood. This whole family is just messed up. You see, Fire Lord Azulon ordered his son Ozai to kill Zuko because of Ozai's attempt to usurp Iroh's birthright of taking over as Fire Lord after Azulon's passing. It's all very Shakespearean. Long story short, Azulon was poisoned and Ozai took over, and any Fire Lord who would willingly kill his own father to take over isn't that great of a guy. I mean, we all know how bad Fire Lord Ozai was, right? I mean, he spent most of the show shrouded in shadows, so you know he was evil to his core. As Fire Lord, he basically followed in the footsteps of Sozin and Azulon, you know, conquer the world and all that fun stuff. He even had the added benefit of another appearance of Sozin's comet, which he almost used to completely burn everything down and start over. That's such a stark contrast to what the Fire Lord started as that it's almost sad. Overall though, things turned out okay as the Avatar and his plucky friends saved the day and ended the cycle of pain and destruction. Good job, Team Avatar. Now, all this seems bad, right? It's easy to look over this entire history of the Fire Lords and think their entire system of ruling is a poor one. And granted, the past is filled with examples of how exactly the system is broken, but you have to acknowledge what a huge difference it makes when there's a Fire Nation ruler that actually cares about people, peace, and prosperity over true power. This started when Zuko took over as Fire Lord. After everything he learned, he knew what it meant to be a true leader. And thank goodness for that. Could you imagine if Azula had actually been Fire Lord? Scary stuff. But what a difference a good ruler makes. Zuko worked hand in hand with the Avatar to start repairing all the damage that was done by Zuko's ancestors. Together, they helped form the United Republic, which is a sovereign state, with its capital, Republic City, being a central hub for benders and non-benders from everywhere to live together. And although Zuko deserves a lot of the credit, I actually want to highlight Fire Lord Azumi, who is Zuko's daughter, and is the last Fire Lord we see in the Avatar cartoon universe. She only has a few scenes, but she makes a point in saying how the Fire Nation has spent so much time fighting wars in the past, and will only enter another one when there are absolutely no other options. That's a small gesture, sure, but knowing that there's someone on the throne who has learned from the mistakes of the past is promising for the Fire Nation and for the future Fire Lords.
If you have mixed feelings about the upcoming Avatar: The Last Airbender reboot, we don't blame you. The 2010 movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan left a bad taste in the mouths of many fans. But we'll explain why we think this version is something we can get excited about. Before we begin, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss a video. Without further ado, here's what we know about the new live-action Netflix series, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
It's time for you to stop doing this!
Fans of the animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender have been let down before. The original 2005 Nickelodeon series was a huge hit, and naturally, people were eager to capitalize on it. We were excited to hear that a movie was being made back in 2010, and to top it all off, it was being directed by the infamous M. Night Shyamalan.
What a twist!
But saying the movie was a flop is underselling it. Famous critic Roger Ebert called it an agonizing experience in every category he can think of, and others still waiting to be invented. Come on, Ebert, tell us how you really feel. With that in mind, we don't blame you for feeling apprehensive about the idea of something else based on Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Never mind!
However, this recently announced Netflix series seems like it's something we should really be getting excited about. Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko are the original co-creators of the series, and they're both going to be heavily involved in the Netflix series. When Netflix tweeted the news, they added, "This is what we've been training for all these years." DiMartino and Konietzko also spoke up about the series, promising fans the new series will avoid the mistakes of the movie The Last Airbender. They view this series as an opportunity to greater explore the characters, story, and world building of the original series. The movie tried to pack a ton of things into its limited runtime and frankly didn't do a very good job.
Okay, guys! Enough!
Now, DiMartino and Konietzko have a chance to get things right, and they know it. We could go on and on and on all day about why The Last Airbender was such a disaster, but let's talk about perhaps the most noticeable issue with the movie.
You're lying!
The Last Airbender featured white actors playing the parts of characters who were of Asian descent on the show. Whitewashing is a major problem in Hollywood, and it's something fans are increasingly calling out. As if that wasn't bad enough, the movie cast Indian and Iranian actors to play members of the aggressive Fire Nation. Needless to say, this was incredibly problematic, and it's something that DiMartino and Konietzko completely understand. They've spoken out to reassure fans that this sort of controversial casting won't take place in the live-action series. They promise the characters in the Netflix series will be non-whitewashed and culturally appropriate, which is something we really look forward to seeing. So often we see actors and producers making excuses for culturally insensitive or underperforming films.
Maybe next time you can design me better.
In addition to the original creators taking an active role in this series, fans can also look forward to hearing music from original composer Jeremy Zuckerman. There's no denying that DiMartino and Konietzko and Zuckerman know how to create a fantastic and compelling series. By teaming up with Netflix, they'll have the resources they need in order to create something truly special. According to Netflix's Vice President of Kids and Family Content, Melissa Cobb, Netflix also recognizes the talents of the series creators. They look forward to supporting their efforts to transforming Aang's world into a live-action series. Now, we know that Netflix has an iffy history of releasing live-action adaptations of animated series. Death Note and Fullmetal Alchemist were both released to mixed reviews.
Whose side are you on?
But there was a lot going on behind the scenes of those movies which had nothing to do with Netflix. In fact, Netflix has an excellent track record of adapting existing media and staying true to its roots. Just look at what big hits 13 Reasons Why and To All the Boys I've Loved Before have been.
Ow.
And as we said earlier, the creators are having a heavy hand in this project. We have no doubt Netflix will give them the resources they need to succeed and produce something truly incredible. While we don't blame you for having complaints about The Last Airbender, there were some things beyond the control of M. Night Shyamalan. Trying to pack the entire first season of a show into a movie is ambitious to say the least. To make it happen, so much had to be cut out, and this included pretty much every last shred of humor and charm of the original series.
Someone's in love.
It's tough when you're trying to tell an audience a complicated story with nuanced characters in a relatively short period of time. It's made even more difficult when your core audience is incredibly familiar with the source material. Although we don't know the details about how long each episode will be, the first season will undoubtedly be longer than a single film. This means that the Netflix live-action series will give the characters an opportunity to grow, develop, and simply interact with those around them. With the plot rushing along at a breakneck pace during the movie, there was no time to focus on the small interactions between characters, which made the original series so enjoyable.
Let us leave?
Another thing to keep in mind is that Avatar: The Last Airbender isn't an anime. There's no denying that it's influenced by the format, but at the end of the day, it's important to note that it isn't one. Many animes have regrettable live-action versions, and one reason is because the nuances, slight gags, and visual cues generally don't translate well to other mediums. All of the little things which made the anime so appealing to look at and fun to watch end up getting diluted when it's brought into the real world. But since Avatar: The Last Airbender relies a little less on these things, it has a much better chance of being successfully translated into the live-action medium. With original creators Michael Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko at the helm, we doubt Aang is going to end up being played by Scarlett Johansson. It's no secret that The Last Airbender live-action movie was a flop, and we know they've definitely learned some important lessons from it.
Is that not clear to you?
Hello everyone, I bet you can't get 100% on this Avatar quiz. Which rank are you going to be? Rank 1, the Avatar with 100% accuracy. Rank 2, a Kyoshi warrior with 90% accuracy. Or Rank 3, the Melon Lord with 80% accuracy. Let's begin. Question number 1, who was the Avatar before Aang? Is it A, Avatar Kyoshi, B, Avatar Roku, C, Avatar Wan, D, Avatar Soren? Starting off with an easy one here, just to warm us up. The answer is B, Avatar Roku. Ah, rest in peace, Roku. Question number 2, what is Zuko's mother's name? Is it A, Ursa, B, Aura, C, Azul, D, Hera? Whatever did happen to his mom? The answer is A, Ursa. And if you haven't read it, go check out the comic book that explains exactly where she went. Question number 3, Bumi is king of what city? A, Omashu, B, Oberon, C, Ohala, D, Ozon. Ah, that crazy king. The answer is A, Omashu. And Bumi taking his city back at the end of the series was just one of the best moments. Question number 4, what is Toph's surname? Is it A, Beilong, B, Balrog, C, Beifong, D, Balrog? The answer is C, Beifong. Huh, I always thought her name was Toph Awesome McAwesome Face. Yeah, Beifong's better. Question number 5, what is Uncle Iroh's nickname? Is it A, the Dragon of the East, B, the Dragon of the North, C, the Dragon of the South, D, the Dragon of the West? The answer is D, the Dragon of the West, and if you'd like, he'd happily give you a demonstration. Question number 6, Long Feng was the leader of what corrupt police force? Is it A, the Dai Chi, B, Dai Si, C, Dai Yi, D, Dai Li? The answer is D, Dai Li. And if anyone asks, there is no war in Ba Sing Se. Pass it around. Question number 7, what did Katara steal from pirates in the first season? Is it A, a waterbending book, B, a waterbending scroll, C, a waterbending necklace, D, a waterbending crystal? The answer is B, a waterbending scroll. Oh man, dark Katara. I like it. Question number 8, how old was Roku when he was told he was the Avatar? Is it A, 12, B, 15, C. 16, D. 18. The answer is C. 16 years old. And man, how his life changed forever on that day. Question number 9. What did Sokka drink that caused him to hallucinate in the desert? Is it A. ruby juice, B. rotten flower juice, C. sun juice, D. cactus juice? One of the funniest scenes in the whole series. The answer is D. cactus juice. Don't go drinking that at home, kids. Question number 10. What is the name of the face-stealing demon? Is it A. Ho, B. Ko, C. Frey, D. Khan? Answer, but don't make any emotions with your face. The answer is B. Ko. And you see how many legs he has? This dude is seriously creepy. Alright, halftime break. How you doing so far? How are your chakras? Are they all aligned and flowing freely, or are they blocked? Well, let's see if we can fix that. Round 2 coming up right now. Question number 1. What item does Zuko use to help track Iroh in the finale? Is it A. a sock, B. a white lotus tile, C. a sandal, D. a picture? The answer is C. a sandal. Uncle Scent was just too strong. Question number 2. What is the boy's name Zuko befriends in the episode Zuko Alone? Is it A. Ping, B. Sora, C. Han, D. Lee? One of the best standalone episodes of the whole series. The answer is D. Lee. And he taught Zuko a valuable lesson. Question number 3. What is Boomy's pet goat gorilla named? Is it A. Froppy, B. Flopsy, C. Foggy, D. Fluffy? Aw, cute. I want one. The answer is B. Flopsy. Who knew a goat gorilla would be that terrifying? Question number 4. Who is the chief of the Northern Water Tribe? Is it A. Chief Anon, B. Chief Aeon, C. Chief Anuk, D. Chief Aeson? The answer is C. Chief Arnuk. Solid dude. I'd vote for him. Question number 5. What ancient tribe do Zuko and Aang find while searching for firebending secrets together? Is it A. Sun Warriors, B. Sun Spears, C. Sun Raiders, D. Sun Gods? The answer is A. Sun Warriors. And these guys were awesome. They were very intense, but also had a good sense of humor. Question number 6. What does Aang give Wan Shi-tong in order to gain entrance to the library? Is it A. an old book, B. a waterbending scroll, C. a knot made from string, D. a wanted poster? What would you give a giant owl as a gift? The answer is D. a wanted poster. Hey, at least it was better than Sokka's gift, right? Question number 7. The Boiling Rock is run by which of Mai's family members? A. her father, B. her uncle, C. her grandfather, D. her brother? The answer is B. her uncle. And I would imagine Thanksgiving dinners after this whole episode were very awkward. Question number 8. What is the name of the creepy bloodbender in The Puppet Master? A. Haka, B. Hama, C. Hela, D. Henna? Ugh, I'm creeped out just thinking about her. The answer is B. Hama. And man, oh man, was this lady scary. Bloodbending freaks me out. Question number 9. How many separate stories are there in the Tales of Ba Sing Se? Is it A, 4, B, 5, C, 6, D, 7? Quick, count fast. The answer is C, 6. And yeah, we can all agree Uncle Iroh's was the best. Question number 10. Who wrote the extremely accurate play that Team Avatar went to watch near the end of Season 3? Is it A, Fei-on Lee, B, Dai-Mei Chow, C, Kaylee Ren, D, Puan Tim? The answer is D, Puan Tim. And man, oh man, do I want to meet this guy. He knows his stuff. Alright, bonus question. Who is the voice of Katara? Yeah, going behind the scenes here. No multiple choice. Do you know the answer? Tick, tick, tick. Time's almost up. The answer is Mai Whitman. Good job for all those who got it. Alright, that's a wrap on this Avatar quiz. How'd you do? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and be sure to also tell us what other quizzes you want to see here at CBR. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and watch out for Azula. Heard she's lurking around here somewhere.